Hello and welcome everybody to our I-9 training for HR specialists, E-Verify or E-Scarify. There is honestly nothing to be scared about, so the jazzy little title we have here, E-Verify, is really what it's all about today. I'm going to use up a few minutes just to give folks a minute to join us. There are quite a few folks signing on. Please remember you can use your chat column if you have questions. I am going to try and get all your questions answered. I cannot guarantee it, but we do encourage you to use your chat column and line up questions. We'll keep time at the end with our program. My name is Bernard Wolfsdorf. I am a certified specialist in immigration law. I am based here in, sorry to say, for you folks on the East Coast, beautiful and sunny Santa Monica. Yep, it's January 22 and the sun is shining. Somewhat weird, actually, this warm weather we're having, but not complaining at least for today. We are going to focus on I-9 training. The reason being is that if you are required to participate in E-Verify, you really need to make sure that your I-9s are in order, because E-Verify, of course, is a government database, and the fact is the government is data mining that database to ensure compliance. I'm not trying to scare anyone away. I'm just simply saying that before you participate in a government monitored database system, you do want to have your I-9s completely in order. So just again, giving folks a minute or two to join us. The Wolfsdorf Immigration Law Firm does provide a series of webinars on a variety of topics. Our next webinar is February the 5th. That is on EB-5. Investors, the green card program where individuals invest $500,000. Yes, it's buy a green card. $500,000 will get you a green card. On Wednesday, February the 6th, we have our F1 student webinar, which is work visa options after OPT. That'll be done by my colleague, Fuji Wittenberg. So if you know students who want to review their options. On Wednesday, February 13th, we will be doing a webinar on religious worker visas by Cliff Rosenthal, one of the leading specialists in religious worker visas. And then again, which will probably be of interest to this particular audience, on February 21, we're going to be doing a immigration workshop 101 for HR work visa options for foreign nationals, specifically focusing on, for example, the H-1B, because we're getting very close to H-1B season that starts April 1, and with the pickup in the economy this year, we're anticipating that H-1B visas will be used up in a very, very short period of time. So, again, welcome everybody to our I-9 webinar. We're going to deal with a variety of challenging issues today. Remember again to please use your chat column. We will have an opportunity to answer all your questions at the end of today's program. So I just want to kick off and start with some of the basic issues. I just need to bring my tech fellow up here to advance our slides, and there we go. This first slide, quite frankly, and it's kind of important to understand, I don't like to read slides, but ICE has made it very clear that they want to remove the lure of jobs, which is what brings people to the United States, and via a strategic I-9 verification process, we can verify if people have the right to be employed. So by removing the lure of jobs, the government believes that they will be able to control or deter undocumented folks from coming to the United States and seeking employment. So that is the whole rationale behind the I-9 immigration framework. This arose, of course, in the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 when President Reagan gave us amnesty. They also introduced the I-9 scheme, which has, to some degree, been enforced on and off over the past 20 years, but not with great consistency. So we are now seeing massive enforcement with E-Verify. In many states, we already have mandatory E-Verify laws for those folks who are on government or federal contracts over 100,000. They are also required, at least that division is required to in fact register and participate in the E-Verify program. So this is, in my opinion, a steam train that simply cannot be stopped. The simple bottom line is that most of the bills that we are seeing in Congress have some form of E-Verify program, some form of E-Verify aspect that will undoubtedly be included in future immigration as we see immigration unfold. And it's a very, very high priority this year. We will undoubtedly see more and more emphasis with E-Verify, with mandatory verification through a government database. This is despite the fact Intel, for example, indicated that in their recent review of their use of E-Verify, they had an 11% hit or problem rate. Now, that is very substantial if you have a large workforce. Over 10% of your workforce and not being able to verify their right to be employed is a very serious issue. That is without even going into certain industries like warehousing and agriculture, where it's well known that we have large numbers of undocumented workers in the United States. My prediction is that Congress will pursue some form of, and we shouldn't be using the A word, amnesty, but some form of path to citizenship for immigrants who pay taxes and comply with the law. We will see, and President Obama has made it clear, that Congress is going to tackle the immigration dilemma just as soon as they've got through the current challenge, which is the gun crisis is obviously taken priority at this point, but we will see immigration coming up next. So the message from Immigration and Customs Enforcement is that they are not just targeting workers, but they are targeting the employers. And we are seeing this across the board with both Department of Labor and mainly ICE undertaking audits in relation to employers who may not be, and again, this is not about hiring undocumented. This is not about hiring people who do not have the right to work. This is about completing Form I-9 in a timely and accurate manner upon commencement of employment. People are confused about this. People, well, I only hire Americans. That's not the issue. The question that I always ask people is, has the CEO, or do you have an I-9 for the CEO of the company? And once you have your I-9s in order and you understand how the program works, then you are in a position, in my opinion, to potentially sign up for E-Verify so you can safely dive into this framework without exposing the company to undue risk. The idea of signing up for E-Verify before you have set up systems which ensure compliance with the I-9 framework is quite frankly a mistake. The reality is that there are criminal prosecution for egregious violators, knowingly hiring and continuing to hire undocumented workers. More than 5 undocumented workers can and does lead to criminal prosecution. And then, of course, Form I-9 inspection has led to considerable civil fines. What we're going to address today is how employers can avoid civil fines And as for folks who knowingly hire undocumented workers, well, there's not much we can do for you other than to say, please be careful. You know, people are serving considerable time in prison for knowingly hiring. We're dealing with an agency here. This is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That is the same folks who are responsible for criminal interdiction of drugs, weapons. We are dealing with a very, what I'd call, hardcore agency, one that encourages the use of wires, wiretaps. Please do not push your luck with ICE. You will not win. So these statistics, audit results since 2009, this is not current through the last year. Over 700 companies have been debarred. What debarred means is they are prohibited from sponsoring individuals for immigration benefits. Over 8,000 audits of employers. Well, we could always look and say, well, there's 6 million employers in the United States. It's still only a small percentage. But quite frankly, the number of companies that are being audited is rather high. I've personally handled several ICE audits. And unfortunately, once you have an ICE audit, that will bring in other federal agencies such as the IRS, Department of Labor, etc., who will also start examining your books, as it were. And they've collected, this number is not current, my speculation is over $100 million in financial sanctions for failing to comply with the I-9 framework. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the current form that is in circulation. This is a little bit confusing because the current version has an expiration date of August 31, 2012. What's the easiest way to get the I-9 form? Quite frankly, just Google the word I-9. You will see the most current form. And even though it has an August 31, 2012 expiration date, that is the current form that is in circulation. So you've got to start off by making sure that you have the correct form and that you are using, you can actually use either version as of the present time. Sorry, I just want to check the sound, make sure that everything is on, make sure that everybody can hear me. If you have any comments, please note the chat column is functional at this point. And if you're having any technical problems or any other issues, please do let us know. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We currently have 168 folks online. That is an excellent turnout, although we had over 300 registered, but it is just after the holidays. So we are undoubtedly seeing extensive enforcement with the current I-9 form, and one absolutely does have to be familiar with every aspect of this form. Now, the I-9 form is a simple one-page form. This is the single most complicated one-page form I think that the federal government has ever produced. They're in the process now of actually turning it to a two-page form, which I do like, by the way. Some of the proposals that they have will actually solve some of the problems. When exactly that new form will be introduced, we can't exactly tell you. So this current expiration date, August 31, is the current version. Watch for an updated form coming soon. My prediction is within the next few months we'll be able to use that new form. So what has changed now? If you actually need a single source, now by the way, at the end of this webinar, you're all going to be sort of experts in the I-9 arena. You're going to know exactly how to approach your I-9s, how to set up the systems, whether to E-Verify or not. We will go through all these basic concepts. Again, the theme that I have mentioned, and I will repeat myself, is it is not smart to sign up to E-Verify until you know how to do your I-9s, you have trained staff, and you've set up an E-9 protocol which is 100% rigidly enforced. Because some of the problems with I-9s, let me give you a typical example. The foreign national must complete Section 1 of the I-9 before the end of the first day for pay. So people think, oh, I've got 3 or 4 days to do this. No, no, no. The employer employee has to complete Section 1 on day 1 of the I-9 form. So in order to do your homework and do your reading, the #1 publication that the government, just to give you some resources, is the M274. That's M for mother, hyphen 274. Again, if you need to look at it, just Google, and you can do it even while we're talking here. Just Google M274, and that will pull up the government's handbook. You can read all 100+ pages, or you can listen to this webinar, and you'll pretty much know everything that is in that book by the end of this webinar. What are the changes? Some of the changes in the last version of the I-9 is that you cannot, documents must now be unexpired. So in the past, one could use an expired passport, one could use an expired driver's license. The passport, of course, would show both the right to be employed and identification. The so-called List B documents, that's only an identity document, and unfortunately you cannot use an expired driver's license. Now, this is quite a difficult framework. The government's actually reduced the number of documents that are available, and this presents a considerable snag because only a small percentage of Americans actually have passports. And if they do not have a valid driver's license, excuse me, and an original, that is an original Social Security card, who knows where their original Social Security card is, then you cannot in fact complete an I-9. And it's kind of interesting. I actually recently hired a retired judge, and he, of course, only had a federal passport, which he had to hand in, and he did not have proof of his right to be employed, so we had to sort of delay the start date because here was somebody who had served with the U.S. Department of Justice for 30 years, and I could not complete I-9, the form I-9. Of course, one can always go in and apply for a passport, but that takes a few days at least, even with the rush framework. The new passport card, and for those of you who don't have one and just want a nice simple application, the passport card is now a List A document. That's effective August 8, 2008. That is, of course, both List A document is both a document that shows the right to be employed, and of course it shows ID. Now, we do in immigration just use a lot of summaries here. There's the word there, EAD, Employment Authorization Document /AP, that is Advanced Parole. This is the new document that is issued to foreign nationals while they are waiting for their green cards, the Employment Authorization Document and the Travel Document. This is the combined single card, and this is usable as a List A document. When you are completing the Form I-9, and by the way, if you have time, we're going to go through it. You can Google the word I-9, and the form will come up. You may want to just have a quick look at it if you're a real rookie, and you will see on the left-hand side it refers to List A, which is the documents that show your right to be employed and your identification, and your List B, which is your ID document, and your List C, which is your employment authorization document. And the most important point to note is that it has to be a List A document, or, that is, repeat, or a B+C document. So either you take a List A document showing proof of your right to be employed and your identification, or you have to have a List B and a List C document. So some of the changes that were made in the last iteration of the form was to limit the number of documents that are actually usable and to add one or two of the new changes. So other changes to the I-9, this is the last version, is they eliminated from List A the Certificate of Naturalization, which is kind of crazy because, it's a very official-looking document, but that Certificate of Naturalization, this is the confusing point, is now a document that shows, so even though it's got the foreign national citizen's picture, it is now a List C document, which is the right to be employed. So an unexpired re-entry permit, what we call the white passport, which now, of course, is green again, that is no longer a document which verifies the individual's right to be employed and identification. So the newest version of the M274, and if you're in this arena, please Google that what is it? It's not a word, just M-274, and you will see the June 2011 version. Now, the Social Security number is not required for Section 1. This is confusing to a lot of people. You do not have to have a Social Security number in order to be employed in the United States. People are confused. Well, how do I do that? I've just hired this Canadian. We don't have a Social Security number. They've told me it's going to take a month. What am I going to do? He's got a work visa. I know he's authorized to work, but what you do is you just put in 999. You just put in various zeros. The problem is that for E-Verify, you do require a Social Security number. So that is a little bit of a snag. There's a lot of inconsistencies. We don't have all the answers. We can tell you what to do, but we do not have all the answers to all the questions that will come up in this arena. And the reason is very simple, and that is that the government has not developed answers to many of these questions. So who needs to complete the Form I-9? Who completes? Is this only for foreigners? Is this only for people with foreign-sounding accents like me? By the way, that phony accent that you can hear, that phony English accent, is actually my South African accent. I was born in South Africa. I'm a proud dual citizen of the United States, but that's the accent if you haven't worked it out by now. So who needs to complete this? Citizens, nationals, and non-citizens. The bottom line is everybody who is going to be employed in the United States, and that U.S. citizens includes people born in Puerto Rico, Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Northern Mariana Islands. Nationals of the United States are people born in American Samoa and in the Swain Islands. By the way, small little point, the Spanish version of the form can only be used in Puerto Rico. So in other parts of the United States, you must use the English version of the form. Let's try one more time, English version of the form. Exempt groups. Who is exempt from completing Form I-9? The first one is grandfathered employees. If the CEO of your company started that company on November 6, 1986, yes, he's pretty old like me, simple bottom line is that person is exempt and does not need to be grandfathered. So if the person has been continuously employed from November 5, so if you've got a janitor or a CEO who's been employed from November 5, 1986, they are grandfathered and do not need to be I-9s or have an I-9 on file. Other than that, every single person employed in the United States needs to have an I-9, other than casual domestic workers. That is not, by the way, a domestic worker who works full-time in your house. So if there is a nanny or a gardener or a butler who is working full-time, they have to be I-9. Yes, gulp, gulp, gulp. Independent contractors, and that is legitimate independent contractors, and it's not like you're going to set up an independent contractor scheme just to avoid having to complete the I-9. That'll get you into bigger trouble. Providing labor where employed by a contractor providing contract services. So we now have these various temp agencies, leasing agencies, etc., and several, these have become quite popular because they are in fact exempt groups. Of course, the leasing company or the temp agency is required. And here's one that confuses people, not physically working on U.S. soil. So I get this question well, not every day, at least once a week. This is the issue of somebody who is paid by an American company. But if somebody is paid by an American company and is working in Canada or working in Britain or working wherever they're working, you do not need to complete Form I-9 and verify their right to be employed. So I-9 does not have to be completed for an individual who is not working on U.S. soil. So that's very, very important. Okay, so here's the big issue, E-Verify or not. Do not sign up until you understand the program unless it is mandatory. When it is mandatory, we'll go into the various states which have mandatory programs. Right now, it's complete confusion. Which states require it, which states don't require it. If your company is doing business in several states, you can register for only those particular states. If you have federal contracts in excess of 100,000, you can have the people working on those contracts comply with E-Verify. So what exactly is this program? It is an automated link to federal databases. that is Homeland Security, SSA, Social Security Administration, and basically these databases will verify whether or not the individual has the right to be employed. Sounds simple, right? Well, yes, no. Unfortunately, it's not that simple because the federal databases, and to give the government credit, they've done a good job in improving the federal databases, but they are very far from accurate. And let's assume that we have a married spouse who changes her name or his name, as you can legally do in California, and unfortunately they don't go and change the Social Security. They don't change the name in the Social Security database. Well, nobody is going to know. So they are starting to connect with driver's license records in various different states. So the database is getting better, but it is very far from being ready for prime time because the error rate is still rather high depending on the region and depending on who is being employed. So how do you go about registering? And don't just sign up until you know what you're doing, but employers can register online at uscis.gov. By the way, there is a very good, and you can Google this word as well, called I-9 Central. I-9 Central has an excellent employee-employer verification information database. Now, the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU. What is this MOU? Well, this is what I would call the basis, the essence of E-Verify. Before you proceed, that is, before your company proceeds, you must read the 13-page MOU. And the sad part about it is I'm not going to spend today going through the Memorandum of Understanding, which, by the way, the government is in the process of updating. So if you want to make comments about the MOU, if you've had the misfortune of having to read it, but it needs to be read, you need to make sure that you understand what it is you're signing up for. This is the MOU with the DHS and SSA. The most important thing is that you will, in fact, be surrendering some of your Fourth Amendment rights to due process and notice, because by signing that MOU, you're giving away your rights to receive notice of an intention to inspect the I-9s. Folks, ICE can simply walk in and if you've signed the MOU and demand that the I-9s be presented immediately. Why is this a problem? In every single situation where I've had an I-9 audit, I've been able to work with ICE to give us a little bit of time to actually clean the I-9s up before we hand them in. So that is probably the single most important point that you have to consider, is if you're going to sign that MOU, if you're going to have ICE just knock on your door and walk in and demand your I-9s, and those I-9s are a mess, you've made a mistake. You've made a big mistake by signing on to E-Verify, signing on to the MOU until you know exactly what's going on in the I-9 scenario. In a nutshell, you must listen to this webinar and learn nothing. That means that you already know everything that we are discussing and that you are at present an I-9 expert. It becomes a little challenging from time to time because there's some questions which quite frankly simply cannot be answered. All right, so number one, staff members who sign on to E-Verify must complete the online tutorial. Again, must complete the online tutorial. You have to certify that you, in fact, have completed it before you sign on. So what happens here? How does this work? The electronic query is only submitted once the I-9 is completed. Now, I cannot overemphasize the importance of not using E-Verify as a pre-screening tool. There are two sides to this I-9 tightrope. The first one is making sure that you comply with the government's framework. The second, most important one, is that you do not discriminate. For example, here's a typical example of discrimination. You hear me speak, you hear there's a funny foreign accent, you say to yourself, aha, okay, Mr. Wolfsdorf, you have a funny accent, please show me your green card. Bingo, I got you. What do you mean I got you? Well, here's the simple bottom line. I do not have a green card. Why don't I have a green card? Well, because I'm an American citizen. And the mere fact that you ask me for a green card because I've got a phony English accent means that is discrimination. And the Department of Justice will investigate. So the Department of Justice will investigate discrimination charges. So if you end up asking foreign nationals for certain documents or specific documents, that is clear evidence of discrimination, because you're not going to ask an American who presents his or her documentation for a green card. You're only going to ask me, and I'm going to regard that as discrimination. Of course, I'm not that kind of guy, but the fact of the matter is this goes on. Employer walks a narrow tightrope between what you're allowed to ask for and what, in fact, is permissible within the framework of the Immigration Reform and Control Act, which, as I say, has very strong anti-discrimination provisions. Now, I mentioned Immigration Reform Act of 1986. Yes, this was President Reagan's law. What's the big deal here? Why is there suddenly this emphasis? Well, the simple reality is the Bush administration pushed it a little at the end. The Obama administration and Labor Secretary Hilda Solis, gee, we're seeing something very different here. We're seeing a lot of enforcement, not these big dramatic raids with helicopters and dogs surrounding factories. What we are seeing are the so-called I-9 audit notices going out. It's the so-called silent raids. A little notice arriving in the mail to a large company. Please be advised that you have 3 days to present your I-9 forms. We want to see all your I-9 forms for the last 3 years. And we want to know which are your affiliate companies. Suddenly, I've had this case, panic, 20,000 employees, who knows where the I-9s are. We've never gone into what we call electronic storage. The I-9s are a mess. Everybody is freaked out. How often do I get those calls? About once a month, once every 2 months. Okay, let's go back to E-Verify. What this is this is only for new hires. This is only for prospective employees who have already completed the I-9 form. You put in the information into the database, and you may get back a tentative non-confirmation. Tentative non-confirmation, the closest I can call it is a yellow light, and with E-Verify you then have a designated procedure that you have to pursue. Basically, the foreign national has to go down to the Social Security office, try and clear up the problem. If it's at the Social Security office, if it's at the passport office, wherever it is, clear up the documentation before that individual is authorized to be employed, and they have a designated period of time. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of the E-Verify program with the timelines, etc. We'll hold that for our next webinar. What I do want to deal with is the big issue is, do you in fact move forward with E-Verify? Do you in fact register for E-Verify? I think that this is a program that is going to be legislatively enacted for the entire United States. Hopefully they do something for agriculture, because there are allegations that 80 or 90% of agriculture in California are in fact undocumented. We may not have food to eat. Sorry, a little dramatic here. If in fact this is done without providing some path to legalization for the agricultural workers and possibly other industries as well. Okay, what is this? I am referencing here LawLogix, by the way, and not to plug any private company. This company does have a reasonably good electronic storage package. They do have a very good I-9 package. Another good one to give them a plug is the company Tracker, T-R-A-C-K-E-R. You should look at least at these two specialty software companies. Of course, there are the major companies that have electronic storage and I-9 verification packages. But just because I'm using their chart, we can see there that the red states require all or most employers: Utah, Arizona, Louisiana, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. E-Verify is already required. So if you're in one of those states, this debate about whether or not to do it is a little stale. Public employees and or contractors, you can see the blue states there that are required. Public employees only, the dark blue, and then the gray, employers through local or municipal, and then the requirements being rescinded, which are the green states. You have to check this chart. Oh my gosh, isn't this a mess? And of course, remember, folks with federal contracts over $100,000, they have to do that anyway. That's already been enforced for several years. So you have to learn about this E-Verify. You don't have a choice. And if you're in one of those red states and you don't know about E-Verify, oh my gosh, you really should be, because most of them have had enforcement dates starting at least in January. So you really need to get up on E-Verify. So these statistics also are not current. E-Verify program today, do not be afraid. This is the first time that I have ever basically done a presentation where I've said to employers, do not be afraid. 385,000 companies enrolled. I think that number is much higher. That represents over 1.1 million hiring sites represented. I believe there's 6-7 million employers in the United States. For fiscal 2011, which is really 2010, the government did massive outreach. That same period, 17 million E-Verify queries. That's a lot. And this is also that old statistic, over 1,400 companies enrolling every week. So we are seeing a massive surge in E-Verify popularity. So again, this is the steam train that cannot be stopped, and yet you really need to know what you're doing before you dive in here. So pros and cons, okay? Deterrent effect. Well, clearly, and you'll see E-Verify hands out nice little, several hotels and restaurants, we are E-Verify compliant. This does send a message to undocumented folks, maybe this isn't the right place to be finding a job. Of course, there's one very negative thing about E-Verify, and there's a few negative things, but the worst one is identity theft. E-Verify generally will not pick up identity theft, although as they are starting to put photo ID into various driver's licenses and directly connecting with driver license databases, even some of the identity theft cases are going to get picked up in those particular states. I think Florida is one that already connected its driver's license to the E-Verify database. So now they can actually confirm that that individual is really the person they claim to be. There's something about identity theft that really scares somebody. So there has to be a comfort level for management and HR that all new hires are going to be checked against government database. This is also a valid argument for worksite compliance. So if there's been a problem, you can say, look guys, we're trying to comply with the law. We registered for E-Verify. So the government does like that. Is it going to let you off the hook? Absolutely not. The fact that you've complied with E-Verify and you are breaking the rules, some of the biggest fines actually have been issued to E-Verify participating employers. So not a solution for those of you, but certainly a sign. And this next point, that Congress basically every time they provide a benefit, they are tying it in some way to E-Verify. Let me give you an example. Optional practical training. Every foreign national student who graduates can almost every can get a 12-month employment authorization. But for those who are in the STEM arena, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that's the STEM occupation, they can get a 17-month extension if the employer is E-Verified. Repeat, 17-month extension for STEM OPT folks, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, if in fact the employer is registered for E-Verify. So this is a big deal, and it is certainly encouraging a lot of tech companies to in fact comply with E-Verify. So is this right for you? It does not guarantee against government enforcement. Controversy over the, was that controversy? I guess if I'm Prince, I would, Prince the singer that is. I'm throwing in my bad jokes now because this topic gets pretty dry. Controversy It's my bad accent, funny accent. Over the accuracy of databases. I'm making fun of myself, by the way, because this really is the big deal. The accuracy of the databases. I mean, if you lay off somebody who's authorized to be employed, does that subject you to potential discrimination or labor law action? Well, potentially yes. So if you rely on an inaccurate database, so you really need to screen that foreign national or that person as a U.S. citizen who's getting a reject and make sure that you don't terminate people who have permission to be employed merely because the database is inaccurate. For example, with Latino names can be very confusing. We take the mother's name, the father's name, we get married, we get divorced, the names change, and it may in fact be that individual is authorized to be employed. Concern about lack of available resources and funding. Well, the program is actually now being funded reasonably well. They are funding it, of course, with all these large fines, so ICE is making a lot of money, spending a lot of time on outreach. That point is no longer completely valid. Non-confirmation resolution is time-consuming and disruptive for both the employer and the employee. I already mentioned that in the context of the Intel study, which found that 11% of their workers had potential issues. That's a very high percentage. Must hire and later fire if not resolved. This is the problem. What if somebody comes in and doesn't have valid documents and you hire them and then they leave? And what if they go somewhere else? So you could have somebody, you could have a revolving door with somebody who gets hired and fired every 30 days, but if you're using the E-Verify database, it gives an undocumented individual quite a period of time within which to, well, collect money. And potentially not be employed. So it is very important that when you are doing I-9s, you know how to spot the bad documents, the bad cases. Although, again, here's the problem. You know, a lot of the fake documents are getting better and better. I'm seeing fake green cards, which are really quite high quality nowadays. So that can be quite a challenge. State variances, very confusing. The MOU gives ICE broad access. I repeat a lot of these points, but this is the point that I made earlier about periodic on-site visits, no notice required, and this puts the employer in quite a difficult situation. I mentioned already the MOU. How do you get to it? We will be sending out this PowerPoint, but you could just Google the word memorandum, ICE Memorandum of Understanding. You can go to the U.S. website. You do have to read this. Google I-9 Central. All of these points will, in fact, get you to the MOU, and you do need to read it very carefully. Okay, common issues in I-9 compliance. Now, the I-9 should only be completed for people who an employer actually hires to perform labor or services in return for wages or remuneration. Now, remuneration, of course, you all HR folks, you don't have to pay anybody money. This could be in exchange for services, could be exchange for food or lodging, and you do need to comply with the I-9 framework if that person is going to get a benefit, and that benefit could be food, could be lodging, could be whatever. It doesn't have to be cash remuneration, and you still have to do an I-9. It may not be used as a pre-screening tool. Now, very, very important to understand this form, and I'm going to spend a little time going through the form so that you all understand it. Section 1. Who completes Section 1? This is the foreign national. Folks, this is not complicated stuff. You just have to understand the broad framework. Number 1, Section 1. There's your form. This Section 1 has to be completed on or before the first day of work for pay. First day of work for pay. That is day 1. When that person is being remunerated for their first day, not necessarily the day they hired, but the first day of work for pay, they have to complete Form I-9. The foreign national has to complete it. What are the problems that we see there? Well, there's a lot, and I'm going to go through them. Section 2, that is you, the employer, has to complete that within 3 business days. Oops, I got a typo. That should be from I need to fix that. I just changed that last night. 3 business days from the first day of work for pay. That's not form, from the first day of work for pay. We now call this the Thursday rule. So you, the employer, if the individual starts working on Monday, by the end of business on Thursday, you, the employer, have to verify that you have seen the original documents, and you have to complete that section 2, and you have to sign off on it, and do not leave that little question blank in between the 2 red lines, certification. I attest under penalty of perjury, oopsie, perjury, that's a big one, that I have examined the documents presented by the above named employee, and that the above listed documents appear to be genuine and to relate to the employee named. So there you take a Social Security card with typographical errors and mistakes, and you're going to swear under penalty of perjury that you've examined that document and it appears to be genuine. Oh, very smart. Okay, go take the fake document and just verify that, you know, you've seen the original and it looks good. If it's an obvious fake, folks, let's try that one more time. If it's an obvious fake, folks, well, fines, prosecution, jail time. Who do they go after? The CEO, the HR, the person who turns a blind eye? Oh, yeah, wink, 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 no problem. Yeah, just bring any old document, that's fine. Well, you're certifying under pain and penalty of perjury. I would suggest that ICE and the Department of Homeland Security is not the correct agency to start messing with. Okay, Section 3. That's about updating and re-verifying. So that is when you need to, you have a work authorization that's expiring, a foreign national, and you need to redo the document. Then all you need to do is complete Section 3. So there you go, the single most complicated form. Page 1, you all know about it. That was really nice and easy, right? Wrong. We're going to spend a little bit more time going through the details. Section 1, common mistakes. People forget to sign or date the form. They forget to complete Section 1 by the first day of work for pay. And of course, my favorite one is they always seem to check the wrong block. Now, citizen of the United States, that's easy. Non-national citizen, it very rarely comes up. Marshall Islanders, etc. Lawful permanent resident, that's the other word for a green card. Fill it out and put in the number. And then this is the one everybody mucks up. An alien authorized to be, and that was mucks up with an M. An alien authorized to work, alien or admission number, you need to type that in until, and this is what people always mess up, is that they forget to put in the expiration date of the employment authorization. When you leave things out, the Social Security number is not mandatory other than for E-Verify. So, and people always seem to sign in the wrong place. Employee signature, you're generally supposed to sign above the line on the left-hand side. No big deal. Those are the common mistakes that the foreign national makes. And now, if there are mistakes, and I'm so nitpicky, I want the form redone. Technically, you can draw a line through the form, you can date and initial the change, but you know what? I just make folks do a new form. I like clean I-9s, so, you know, I'm always fill out a new form. Common mistakes, there we go. We have these problems constantly. Employee did not list the A number. They did not put in the completion date. So that's the biggest problem that we have. And if the foreign national does not sign the form, then the employer has to assume liability. Let's go to Section 2. That's you, the employer. You have to fill out your section. How hard is this? How difficult is this? Come on. It's only 1 or 2 paragraphs. You can't get it wrong? Oh, my gosh. Let me scare you all. I see I-9s every day, all day. My statistic is 50 to 60% of all I-9s I see have errors. 50 to 60. I don't want to sound too smart-ass here. Oops, not supposed to use bad language. I don't want to sound too smart, but the simple bottom line is that pretty much everybody has I-9 errors. A low error rate, 20%. High error rate, 60, 70%. How many are 100%? Never seen it before. I have never seen an employer with 100%. So, you've got, if your I-9s are not in order, some of them are missing, you don't know where they are, you're normal. Okay, there we go. List A. Now, the most important language on this form, let's try one more time. Most important language on this form is the word or and the word and, which is underlined. So it's either list A or list B and list C. What if you fill out all three blocks? Well, bingo, we got you. Discrimination. What? Yes, it's over-documentation, and you know what? That is the #1 favorite thing for the Department of Justice in the anti-discrimination enforcement provisions, is that people cannot read the word and. So it's or, list A, or B plus C. Not too difficult. Okay, common mistakes. List the business name and address. Read the question. Business, organization, name, and address. You put in the name, you leave out the address. Put in the full name. How do you fit it in? Write small. Sign or date, section 2. How difficult is that? Fill in the date of hire. Use the wrong hire date. Okay, when is the hire date? The first day of pay. Not too difficult. Not the day you sign the contract, the first day that person gets paid. That date goes in the certification block. How many people get that wrong? Lots. So that's a very, very common one. And that has to be done within 3 days, business days, of the hire. I need to correct that. It's not hire date. It is first day, 3 days from the first, I've got to get this right, day of pay. Hey, it rhymes. Day of pay. It's not hire date, it's day of pay. So the person actually gets paid, not the date that they hired. Okay, common mistakes, I've already gone through this. One from list A or one from B plus C. How many times have I said that? 1 million. E-Verify for employers. My purpose at the end of this webinar is that you're all going to be E-Verify specialists. Problem is I'm probably going to run over time a little bit. We'll keep going. E-Verify employers, any list B document must have a photo. So if you're going with E-Verify, you've got to have a photograph for a list B document. So school record or report card, daycare or nursery school record, that's got your picture on it, really? Okay. So the list B documents for E-Verify need to have a photo ID. Actually, there's very few. Driver's license, ID card, voter registration card. My recollection is my voter registration card does not have a picture on it. So maybe some of the new ones do. Bottom line is you cannot use that as an ID document. By the way, those 3 examples I used are only for people under the age of 18, school record, report card, clinic, doctor, or hospital record, daycare, or nursery school. That's for under 18s. Those are ID documents, and they do not show the proof of the right to be employed. I really like list C number 8, employment authorization document issued by the Department of Homeland Security. What is that? Who knows? Could be a whole variety of them. You can go to 8 CFR 274A, and it'll list all the employment authorization documents, incident to status, blah, blah, blah. Hey, guys, this stuff is complicated. I don't make these rules. I'm going to try and explain them. Okay, common mistakes continued. Here we are. This is section 2. Just break it out again. That's list A, or B, and C. How many times have I said that? 20? Okay. So employer did not complete information about the document title. Now, when you read those questions, it's confusing. Document title, what is that? California driver's license, U.S. passport. Who issued that? California DMV. What is the document number? What is the expiration date? Now, look at this form. You are required to answer 4 questions in relation to the document. You have to put in the title of the document, you have to put in the issuing authority, you have to put in the document number, and you have to put in the expiration date. 4. And what if you have to list 3 documents? How do you do that when list A only has place for, hold your breath, 2 documents? and even then it's not complete. So quite a challenge here in some respects, folks. Sorry, just need to get some air there. I'm talking so much. 15-second break, folks. Sorry if I barked in your ear. Okay, so photocopy the documents but did not complete the form. Did not complete the information about the document title. Okay to use abbreviations. I don't like abbreviations too much, but nevertheless be careful there. Common mistakes continued. Employer accepted unacceptable documents, documents that have been removed. Those are some of the common mistakes. Employer accepts documents that do not reasonably relate to the individual. And they're the favorite one that I mentioned, reviewed too many documents. That is just all too common, and we are seeing that time and time again. Common mistakes on Section 3. This is the re-verification section. Employer did not re-verify when required. So somebody's hired on an H-1B that's expired. They have to be re-verified. That wasn't done. You now have a problem of knowingly continuing to hire an undocumented if the individual doesn't have work authorization. So if you hire them on an H-1, you let them expire, never renewed it, they've got you for knowingly continuing to hire. That's increased penalties, folks. Employer did not sign Section 3, common mistake. When you fill this out, you know, you really need to sign it. Very, very important for Section 3. Okay, how to complete I-9 for a foreign national with a non-immigrant visa. You have that smorgasbord of visas, E's, H, H3, L1s, blah, 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 blah. Basically, here's how we do it. Document title is passport, country, France. Document number, that's the passport number, expiration, month, day, year. I-94 number. I cannot overemphasize this. It's the I-94 number that gives person the right to be employed, and then you have to put the expiration date of the I-94. Presently, I-94 is a little white card in the passport. How confusing is this going to be? They're about to scrap the I-94. So I don't know what we're going to use when they scrap the I-94. In fact, I think that's the reason that the form is being held up, because nobody knows where they're going to use when the I-94 is gone, because that is the principal document for verifying non-immigrants. What's a non-immigrant? It's a person who has a visa that may authorize them to be employed other than a green card. This is not the green card. There's what an I-94 looks like. L1, you've got this one on the bottom of the form. There's your I-9 form, the electronic printed version. And remember, folks, you've got to see the original, not a photocopy. What is a visa? That's a visa, colorful little thing in the passport, in the foreign national's passport. That's a sample of a visa that does not show proof of a right to be employed. So a visa, non-immigrant visa, does not show proof of a right to be employed. How to complete with an employment authorization document, little plastic card, there you go. You put an EAD, employment authorization, issued by who, DHS, USCIS, document number, you'll see this LIN, that's for Lincoln, Nebraska, and then they'll put in the number, and that's what you use to complete the I-9. It's a List A document with an EAD. You'll see this in OPT, Optional Practical Training, and Adjustment of Status, where people are applying for a green card. Okay, what does an EAD look like? That's what it looks like, although I think I need to put up the new one because this is not the combined card, but it's pretty similar to what it looks like. You now have the combined employment authorization advanced parole document. It says not valid for re-entry here. The new one often does say valid for re-entry. So what about a STEM OPT extension? Oh my gosh, Bernie, would you talk English, please? STEM OPT extension. So you have an employment authorization document that is good for an initial period of 12 months, and then you can get the 17-month extension, and you have to write in the CVIS number that is off the I-20 form, expiration date, plus 180 days. If the employer applies for STEM OPT extension, which is still pending, you can complete the I-9 and attach the expired form, the Form I-20, which is endorsed by the school. This is during the interim period, and the employer must then re-verify the employment authorization no later than 180 days from the original EAD extension. So this is during the STEM OPT extension that is being processed, where we're going for the 17 months because we have an E-Verify employer, and we run into a little snag there. The bottom line is that the STEM OPT can be completed with the expired card. Now, earlier I said you can't use expired documents. Here, of course, you can use the expired card. You use the Form I-20, the Certificate of Eligibility for Student Status, and then you just put expiration date plus 180 days. How to complete for F1 with CPT. Oh, Bernie, you're giving me a headache now. OPT, CPT, what is all this stuff? This is called curricular practical training. Unfortunately, it's quite common. So how do we do it? We put in the passport. We put in the passport expiration date. We put in the I-94 date. We put in the expiration of the I-94 date. We put in the CVIS number off the I-20, and we put in the expiration date on the I-20. CPT is employer-specific to that particular employer. It's improved. It's usually as part of that student's essential curricular program that's called CPT. So how do you find it? There's your CV, your CVIS number up on the top right-hand corner. There's your I-94 for a student visa, and there's your CPT annotation, and you will note the specific company address. So that's page 1 and page 3 of the I-20. So you need to photocopy the I-94 card, photocopy the front page of the I-20, and then you'll see the CPT notation. Now, folks, did I say don't copy too many documents? Yes, I did. And what am I now saying? Copy these documents. Okay? Am I confusing? Yes, I am. Is it my fault? Probably. No. The bottom line is these are the rules. So completing I-9s for the J1, what is a J1? It's an exchange visitor. That's how you do it. How do we fit it in? This is kind of difficult because, you know, they start asking you for more documents and there's even space to write in there. So you put in the passport, unexpired foreign passport, you put in the I-94 card, and you put in the DS 2019. That is a certificate of eligibility for J1 status. So you put in all these 3 blocks, you write them in there, and you put in the document number, DS 2019. That's how you fill it out for J1s. These are the documents that you use for J1s. You use the I-94 card and use the DS 2019 form that you see on the right-hand side. That's the document that gets used. Now, document abuse, common issues in I-9 compliance. Big one, folks. Specific documents requested before the hire date. Bernie, you got a funny accent. Make sure you bring your green card. Bingo, we got you. Require more documents than that are mentioned on the list. Refuse to honor acceptable. These are all discrimination. Document abuse, discrimination charges, big fines, anti-discrimination charges. Please be careful. Don't do this. You have to ask for the minimum documentation that's required. Original versus photocopies of documents. You do have to certify that you have seen the original. Exception for a certified copy of a birth certificate. Remember, birth certificate, the original is on the record. It's usually got some stamp with purple ink or red ink or something that then becomes a certified copy of a birth certificate as an acceptable document. How do I know if a document is real? Reasonable test. Social security number with typos, too many digits. Come on, guys, use your common sense. You know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Not the right thing to do in the I-9 arena. Constructive knowledge. Look, I don't want to spend a lot of time with legal stuff here, but come on, you should have known that was a fake document, okay? Bernie walks in with a so-called green card that's, you know, got some crazy name written on it. You know what? You knew that was a fake document, and therefore you are liable. So you had constructive knowledge. Constructive knowledge definition expanded. I can spend a lot of time on this, but the question is, did you get a no-match letter from the Social Security Administration? Oh, I didn't know anything. You know, this is 8 years ago. I got 20 Social Security no-match letters. At the time, people were saying, oh, don't take this seriously. You know what? You got a Social Security no-match letter? Take it seriously. It is regarded as constructive knowledge that that individual may have not had permission to be employed. Okay? Reckless and wanton disregard, constructive knowledge, very scary. Somebody comes and says, would you sponsor me for a green card? Well, they obviously don't have a green card. So you ask them, well, do you have permission to be employed in the U.S.? Bernie, would you repeat that statement? Do you have permission to be employed in the U.S.? That is the only question you can ever ask. If you've got a pencil, write that one down. Do you have permission to be employed in the U.S.? Employers today are now saying, do you have unrestricted permission to be employed in the U.S.? And if somebody only has a one-year work permit, they could say yes. Will you require visa sponsorship? It's being held that those questions are kind of okay right now. You know, if you kind of need to do it across the board, not only to funny-sounding people like me. Should employer keep copy of supporting documents? You know, 10 years ago I used to say no, now I say yes. Keep the documents because it'll be a defense. You can say that these documents look reasonable. I'm not going to argue over that. I know a lot of people don't want to do it. My attitude is keep it, because if you're criminally charged, then I can come and defend you and show that any common sense guy would have made that mistake. To copy or not to copy, I'm finished with this one. E-Verify must photocopy if the document is being used as a photo screening tool. So if you are using the document as a photo screening tool, passport, ID, employment authorization document, then you must copy those documents as part of E-Verify. Don't copy more than required. That, again, is document abuse. So just the minimum. Over-documentation equals discrimination. OSC, Special Counsel for Immigration-Related Unfair Employment Practices. U.S. Department of Justice, 274B, federal law prohibits discrimination. National origin, retaliation, intimidation, blah, 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 blah. The bottom line is they will prosecute you. 1-800, call the feds. No discrimination, please. Sorry, 10-second break. I know we are almost over time, and I'm sure we have tons of questions, but I'm going to plow through and try and get through all this wonderful, wonderful stuff. Over-documentation, what if the employer is unable to provide documents within 3 days? A receipt rule. Oh my gosh, this receipt rule just gives me a headache, gives everybody else a headache. Receipt rule is for, learn those 3 words, lost, stolen, or damaged documents. If I can only use the receipt rule for lost, stolen, or damaged documents, this is valid for 30 days. So if I am replacing an expired document or getting a renewed work permit, that is not a lost or stolen or damaged document. So if you do use the receipt rule, okay, for a lost, stolen, or damaged document, you have 90 days within which to re-verify. So how do you do this? We've got a stolen passport. We've got a receipt for that passport. We put in a receipt, Department of State, expiration date, we don't know. We line out, so when the document arrives, we line out the word receipt and the old document number. We insert the new document number. We put in the expiration date, and we initial. A clean line out. Don't scratch it out, just a clean line through the middle so you can still read it. That's the receipt rule. Form I-94, temporary I-551, that's a green card with a photo considered to be a receipt of the green card. This is the temporary green card that they will put, temporary green card sometimes in a stamp in a passport. Form I-9 containing an unexpired refugee admission stamp is acceptable. Yes, we let in over 100 refugees, 100,000 refugees a year, so these are quite common. Other examples, AC-21 portability. Oh my gosh, this is where someone has an H-1B, files a new one. That is a situation where a receipt is acceptable. That's even a FedEx receipt, just to confuse you. Most people like to use a government receipt. H-1B cap gap. What is that? That's when the F-1 OPT expires. Extensions, EHL, 240-day rule. How do you do that? This is how you do it. Not too difficult. Learn the language. Read the slide. Right. This is for the H-1B, for example. AC-21, the date H-1B submitted to USCIS. That is how you do H-1B portability. Passport, expiration date, I-94 date, and of course you don't have the number. And then with H-1B portability, sorry folks, talking too much and losing my voice here. So what do we do when you're doing AC portability? Attach the following documents: evidence of the new H-1B petition, such as a courier receipt or the government receipt. copy of the new I-129 form that was in fact filed. You do have to include that. Proof of payment of the government filing fee, copy of the alien's I-94 card, and a copy of the unexpired foreign passport. My gosh, that's quite a lot of documentation on AC portability. How common is that? Very common if you have foreign nationals on your payroll. AC portability, when it's approved, you see the original approval notice there. Update section 3, put in the document title, the number, and the expiration date on section 3 of the form. H-1B cap gap situation, pretty complicated information there. Put in the EAD, put in the expired card, new form I-20, U.S. receipt notice, and then once the H-1B is approved, you then complete section 3, but no later than October 1. This is cap gap for students. What is cap gap? That is the gap between the end of the OPT and the start of the H-1B on October 1. Is this confusing stuff? Yes. Is it in the M274 handbook? Yes. But you've listened to this, so you don't need to read it because it's very easy. Just read the slide. Very, very simple, folks. Simple for me, that is, because I've been doing this for about 20 years. NIV extensions. NIV is a non-immigrant visa. How do you do this? Complete section 3 of the I-9 with the receipt notice. This is the 240-day rule. How do you do it? That's how you do it. You write in I-797 receipt. You put in the document title, expiration date, 240 days, extension, and you put in the date that it was submitted to USCIS. And that's what you write in. Write 240-day extension, and then you put in the date that it was submitted. NIV extensions, you then attach the following: copy of the I-129, proof of payment of the new form I-129, evidence that you filed with immigration or the immigration receipt, and then once it's approved by the end of the 240-day rule, you update section 3 with a new expiration date. Again, line out, initial, that's a clean line out, or complete a new I-9. I often like to complete a new I-9 just because it's so much simpler and easier. Common issues. Can an employer terminate an employee for failure to produce documents within 3 business days? Yes. What I often do is I tell them, look, we got to take you off payroll. Sorry, it's now Thursday. It's 6 p.m. We hired you on Monday. You got paid on Monday. You haven't produced your documentation. We have to take you off payroll. But if you bring employment authorization within the next 7 days, we'll rehire you, maybe give them back pay. Difficult. That's where you got to bring in the labor lawyer. Re-verification. On or before the employment authorization expires, obviously, employee must choose from a list of acceptable documents. If they use the old form, they need to use the new I-9 form to re-verify. So if there was the old version, the one before 0209, and you must now use the new I-9 to re-verify. So this is sort of an exception for re-verification if the old form was used. So use a new form. It's often why I just say complete a new I-9 and don't be confused. It's hard to work all of that. Common mistakes: do not re-verify U.S. citizen. U.S. citizen passport expires, who cares? Permanent resident green card. Green cards are good for 10 years. When it expires, you re-verify? Nope, you do not. Exception. Exception to the exception. What is that colorful little thing we have over there? That is a green card. Somebody just got a little green card. There's an exception here. This is an I-551 stamp. This is good for 1 year, usually, and that must be re-verified, so make sure you have a good calendaring system. Re-verification. Do not verify where there's an approved or unpaid leave of absence. Pregnancy, for example, not necessary. We're expecting that person back. Promotions, layoffs, strikes, transfers to a different office. Repeat, transfer to a different office within the same entity, not necessary. Seasonal employment, so you know that person's coming back every year. No need to re-verify. Rehired employees, I'm going to go really fast, but is rehire within 3 years of the date of previous I-9? Yes. Is the employment authorization still valid? Yes. Update existing I-9? No. If it's the old version, use a new form. Just complete a new I-9. It's just so much easier. Mergers, acquisitions, and restructuring, that's a whole 3-hour topic, but generally speaking, you can either redo the I-9s or assume the liability for the defective ones. That's the one-liner on that. Organization of I-9s. This is really important, folks. If you're just setting it up for the first time, you should have 3 categories. I-9 for current employees, I-9 for employees with expiration dates, like H1, and then I-9s for terminated employees that are going to be subject to purging or destruction. Now that sounds kind of weird, purging or destruction, but you got to do it. Either you're going to keep all your old mistakes and get fined for them, or you're going to legally purge or destroy the documents in accordance with the law. Organization of I-9s, electronic retention, very, very important. Make sure you have a good electronic software system if in fact you're using one. And you probably want to make sure you have the hard copies as well for a while. There's the guidelines on page 23 of the M274, unless they've updated it. What to avoid and what to look for in software. There's been a lot of problems. People have been fined using the wrong software because it didn't keep the right documents or it required them to over-document. Retention rule. All right. We're going to get confused here. After termination, must retain until 3 years after the date of hire or 1 year after the date of termination, whichever is the later. The later of 3 years from the date of hire or 1 year from the date of termination. Later of 3 years after the date of hire or 1 year after the date of termination. I mean, if that's confusing to you, and I know it's confusing to a lot of people, just do it 3 years from the date of termination. You can't be wrong. Of course, that's not the rule. You can be more restrictive. I encourage active destruction of I-9s in accordance with the retention rule. No need to keep all this liability around your neck if you've got mistakes. Throw them out. Make sure you understand what I just said. However, you need to put them into a purging. So when someone is termed, keep this page, look at it, and work it out. Correcting mistakes and omissions, never too late to complete I-9s. Okay, so you're freaking out, you're listening to this thing, you're sweating, you're panicking. You know what? Just go and do it. The government is kind of reasonable if you try. How to correct mistakes and omissions. Never delete whiteout or blackout. No whiteout, no blackout, no scratch out, and never backdate. Well, you can backdate if you want to go to jail. Never backdate. Never backdate, never backdate, never backdate. Did I say that enough times? Scratch out, no. Line out, yes. Initial, yes. Date, yes. If you've made mistakes, and you're all going to go and check this after we finished, remember this. Very, very important. Now, we're very close to the end, folks. The new I-9 form. This is not the official version. What's new on this? Additional employee data, telephone, email. Look at all the stuff they're asking. It's optional, email address, but the Social Security number is not optional, as far as I can see. We're waiting for guidance. This is the new fancy schmancy form. Do I like this form? Yes. Actually, less mistakes. So the signature blocks are kind of a little bit better. I think this is a better form in some respects. And look, wow, nice. They've made it a little bit easier for list A, list B, to make sure they've drawn the line. So that's kind of nice. And then re-verification, rehire, pretty much the same. The big language to learn there is first day of work for pay. First day of work for pay rather than hire date. So that's the big news. So, folks, we did it. Yes, I went over time. Hopefully I haven't given you a headache. You've got my email address. There it is. Visa Law at Wolfsdorf, 1-800-VISA-LAW. Very easy. Call us, email us, check out our website. Please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Let's open up to questions, see how many questions we have. We'll try and answer as many as we can. Folks, I'm amazed. We still have very, very good, oh my gosh, look how many questions. Oh, I like this one. Thank you, whoever said this one. Amazing as always, thank you. Wow. Can I use that quote for our next one? Let's go up to the top, and I'm going to fly through these questions because most of you probably have had enough. Hi, can employer complete the I-9 E-Verify for employee starting on H-1B receipt Also, can you explain how using the document and how to complete Form I-9? That was nice and early, and I know I did that. H-1B receipt, E-Verify, only if it is an H-1 transfer, which is H-1B portability. You cannot hire off an H-1 receipt unless it is H-1B portability or repeat, cap gap, closing. That was near the end slides. Question number 2, are employees required to complete an I-9? Scratch that. Are employers required to complete an I-9 for employees that have been with the company for a very long time? Yes, yes, yes. That was my example, November 7, 1986. So if they started in I forget the date. You have to go back and look at it. 86 was the law was enacted, but we had a 1-year grace period till 87. So November 7, 1986. I could actually just look at my PowerPoint here, stop making stuff up. November 7, 1986, but there was a grandfather provision. So, hey, how often are you going to have that? It's going to be a very old company. Will you cover E-Verify? Yes, yes. Sorry, push that into the back. Will the upcoming form make it easier to distinguish between the portion the employer completes and the section? You know, Section 1 is for the foreign national. Section 2 is for the Section 2 is for the employer. How would you conduct an audit then? DOL has not issued any guidance on it. You know, this is a big and a great question. Internal audit. You know, the problem with an internal audit, it's like my wife's criticism of me. Apparently, I don't know my own bad habits. Sorry, did that sound wrong? So my wife very kindly points them out to me. You're doing your own audit. That didn't work, Bernie. You're doing your own audit, and at the end of the day, you don't know your own mistakes. I know this is self-serving, but it's a very good idea to have somebody who is a specialist review your audit. Do an internal audit, but you're probably not going to catch your mistakes, which is self-serving, but some people say you may want to have a lawyer or a specialist help with that. So to clarify, and this is how I've been doing it, I give soon-to-be employees the I-9 form and do not specify which specific documents to provide. I just give them the instructions that come with the I-9. I don't mention people's names. You did it absolutely perfectly. That is quite correct. That is exactly how you do it. You give them the form, and you give them the list of documents, and you say, choose one from list A, or one from B, and one from C. And if it's E-Verify, a list B has to be a photo ID document. Employees complete the I-9 prior to the first day of hire. Is this a bad thing? It's to be discouraged. It's to be discouraged. You can send it out, but the problem is, are you using it as a screening tool? Oh, let's try one more time. Are you using it as a screening tool? So you open yourself up to a discrimination charge if you have it completed before the first day of pay, hire for pay, whatever the new language is. Employee completes a little bit. When the employee is using a payroll service, and the employer offers the employee the opportunity to participate for an additional fee, is the employee in effect agreeing to the terms of the MAU? Wow, I was waiting for that. The employer payroll company has signed the E-Verify, and if so, does this increase the employer's opportunity to have an ICE audit? Wow, great question. I don't believe you can be liable for an MOU unless you've signed it. If that is the question, you can't. You have to specifically agree to it. A payroll service that does use E-Verify, you know, it's a good thing to use a payroll service that does use E-Verify. Chances are you're going to have less problems. You know what? There's always going to be one question. So we're going to have to talk about that in a little while. But I'm going to say that you do not have liability on that. When you sign the MOU and you open the door to SSA and DHS, can they come in and look at any other records in your organization, IO payroll? That's exactly the point. You cannot just look at an I-9 and solve the problem. They always ask for payroll records and sorry, 10 seconds. They always ask for payroll records and employment records, so that becomes a critical component. Oh gosh, we've got so many questions here today. Speaking of over-documentation, I recently conducted an audit of one of our facilities. Previous reps had a few name changes. They did the right thing by updating, but they had the employee fill out a whole new I-9 and collected 2 new forms of ID, stapled it to the original. Is this an example of over-documentation? No, no, no. I like that. If you have problems, you do a new I-9, the foreign national decides to bring in new documentation, I don't have a problem. You staple the new I-9 to the old I-9 with the new documents. I think you're going to be fine. I have to cut out some of the questions. I'm sorry, there's just so many. Is Social Security still producing no-match letters? Good question. You know, I've heard various different stories. I've heard that Social Security no-match letters are being sent to the alien, scratch that, the foreign national. So not necessarily to the employer. There's 2 types of Social Security letters. We haven't heard of too many going out to the employer, but we have heard of them going out to the foreign national. And by the way, when you get an audit notice, the subpoena actually asks for copies of old Social Security letters. So, you know, if you had them in the past, you may want to reach out to Social Security and get copies because nobody knows where they are anymore. Can you explain who is a non-citizen national? You know, good to look at the book. That's the Marshall Islanders, etc., etc. It doesn't come up very often. Potential conflicts for attorneys regarding working with companies on I-9 compliance and later representing working on an immigration issue. Good question. You know, there's always conflicts. In immigration law, we have to deal with this from an employer's perspective, from a foreign national's perspective. You know, it's a tough one. Sadly, you know, the lawyer really should be representing the employer. I have sadly have to tell employers that they need to lay people off. So that is very challenging. And, you know, if I'm representing the foreign national, then, well, gee. So, you know, many companies, they say to the foreign national, oh, just go out and hire an immigration lawyer. The immigration lawyer really should be representing the company so that, you know, if these problems come up, they are representing the company's best interests. Wow, thanks for all the nice comments, everybody. Conditional green cards, do you re-verify? That's the 2-year green card, the marriage one. You know, the original answer was no, and the current answer is yes. So the 10-year one, no. There was actually an opinion saying the 2-year, that's the marriage-based, and the EB-5 green card for $1 million investors, that does have to be re-verified, unfortunately. Back pay for someone who failed to re-verify if we hire them back within 7 days or so. Seriously, has this been done? Is it common? No, it's just me. I really think you've got to move towards a labor lawyer. But, you know, if people don't have employment authorization, you basically take them off payroll and you don't hire them back. But if you want to be nice, you can say, well, if you come back within 7 days, we'll rehire you with back pay. The truth is they never come back. In my experience, they just never come back. For those terminated employers, if they come back before the purge date, do we move those I-9s back to the active file? Yes. Make them sign a new one. You know, it's always easier just to make out a new one. Gee, another nice comment. Amazing as always. Well, thank you for the nice comments. When will E-Verify be required at California? Well, you know, we live in a liberal state. Probably never. No, I'm joking. I don't know. I think there's a good chance. But simple bottom line is that E-Verify, I think the federal government is likely to make it mandatory. Can we accept Section 1 if it's typed? Yes. Yes. That's not a problem. Will you be emailing the PowerPoint? Yes. And the person who asked that, the answer is yes, especially for you. Will you be sending out a copy? Yes. Will you please show page 1 of the form again? Gosh, go back. Let me send it out to everybody, and then you'll have it. I think some of you have had more than your full of Bernie. Will the presentation be available? Very informative workshop, excellent presentation. Wow, keep saying nice things. I love that. Folks, we are currently at 2 o'clock. I am over time. It's been wonderful. We still have over 100 people. Please sign up for our next webinars. We have one on February 21, which is Immigration 101 Workshop, get you ready for H-1B season. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Hopefully you've all learned something. Reach out to us, Visa Law at Wolfsdorf. If you have a particularly difficult I-9 problem, scan it, send me the I-9. We'll try and get you an answer, although I will be traveling in the next 2 or 3 days. So we're going to be out for a week or so. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Please spread the good word. Sign up for our newsletters, and we will see you all again on the next webinar. And until then, folks, I wish you a pleasant day from lovely and sunny Santa Monica. And until then, farewell, and thank you for joining us. Goodbye.